Like I said from the beginning, we are adopting a homegrown South African term in Indaba. So this really is a discussion. So have your comments and your questions ready. We're going to hear a little bit from each of our experts, but then really open up to discussion, because I'm well aware that there is an incredible amount of leadership expertise in this room that we can all glean from. So Jerry, just to hear a little bit from you in terms of community-led conservation, just setting the scene. I feel like we're preaching to the choir, but the importance of it and really how it's at the forefront of impact.
Thank you so much, Candice. Hi, everybody. So the term community-led conservation, in most cases, people have this definition that comes at different levels of understanding, but the very easiest one that people have in mind is that our communities are the ones who are steering the work that is done on ground. However, I think community-led conservation, if we simplify it to the best, is a governance model that provides opportunities for the communities to apply their right holders' right of the asset that they have, become decision makers of the key issues that are happening with the asset that they have within the space, but also becoming custodians of that change. And this is because they are the ones who interact the most with the ecosystem, and also on the other side, they are the ones who are owning that particular asset. Now that varies on different levels, but in the context of the marine space, the ownership of the marine resources is heavily linked to, do they understand it's more than just fishing? Do they understand that they can question, put bylaws and guidelines that are important for them, for that system to work, but also have ways into which it can incentivize or create value for them. And the reason it is important is because it provides continuation of conservation work, rather than being dependent on either specific types of funding available, because these people care and they want to see that generational change. If you talk to so many people who are living at the coast, they want to see their families still benefiting from that particular resource in the long-term future. So they really care not for just now, but the long-term value. And on the other side, it's also they are the ones who can really tell us what's actually changing. If we are sitting in major cities or wherever we are, and we are not communicating with people who are seeing the actual changes on a day-to-day basis, then it's a complete disconnect. Whatever is going to be designed at any different level will be misaligned with what is actually working on ground if we are not championing that, and that's why it's important.
Thanks, Jerry. So one of the things that our team in the Sustainable Finance Coalition will often ask, and we make long-term commitments to community-led conservation organizations to say, we're going to stand shoulder to shoulder and walk the sustainable finance journey together. And so one of the questions we always have to ask is, what do we need to finance? We all talk about, like, we need money, we need funding, we need finance, but anyone on the finance side of the coin will say, what do you need to finance? You know, are we financing a car, financing a house, financing an anti-poaching team, financing a community service center? What are we financing? And so in talking about community-led conservation being at the coalface of impact, that question is often easier to answer, to say, this is the impact that we are driving, this is the impact that we have to see, and we know what finance we need to put in. So Jerry, just to unpack a little bit more around that coalface of impact and why you think communities are able to say, when you sit down, we need finance for.
So what I do believe is that any type of capital follows trust. And if you say we want to fund trust, how does that look like in a practical way? It means spending time and being together, having opportunities to co-design matters that are important to the people on ground, but also are important to the ones who are providing the capital. And in most cases, the opportunity that brings is that in most cases we say that communities are risky, communities are not investable, and trying to make communities fit to the finance. But I think what we are seeing is working is when we design the finance to fit the communities. And from the preamble of the discussion here, I understood that on the process that SFC uses on finding is finding what really fits for the community. And that really builds the trust because it's designed for them, but also removes the risk that is usually a biggest barrier for that particular flow.
Yeah, Jerry, thanks so much. I love that co-design is so critically important. And on the find process, Nelly, I'm going to come to you because we've been through this process with Blue Ventures, and working side by side with Blue Ventures in the work that they're doing with many beach management units in this neck of the woods. Or in this, I should say, coral reef along the coastline. So Nelly, the SFC team and the BV team have sat together to work out with communities, with beach management units, and other partners, what would the most viable sustainable finance solutions be in these particular seascapes. And if you can just share a little bit around what it meant to build communities into those discussions, and a little bit on the find process and how do we start to identify a viable finance solution together.
Thank you and welcome everyone. I'll start maybe by looking at some of the gaps in financing to the fisher folk. And a study done in Kenya by FAO found that only about 10% of the fisher communities along the coastal region in Kenya were able to access financial services. That's about safe. But out of that, only 1% was able to get credit. So if you look at that difference, then you see that the challenges people have is actually products. Do we have the banks, the financial institutions have appropriate products for the people we are talking of? And then secondly, if you look at the government programs, there are quite a number of government programs designed for different people, different sectors. You will get products in the micro and small scale enterprise development. You will get products in agriculture. None exists for the fisher folk in East Africa. I will start by that. And I will actually then say that the fisher communities are crying because they want to access services. And I will also say that our oceans are bleeding because of the result of what is happening outside. And the women are crying for the future of their children. And therefore, if we don't address issues affecting the fisher folk, and especially in accessing financial services, then we are reaching a dead end. And why is this happening? I will say that this is happening, I'm building on my colleagues' input on involvement of the community. And if you look at what is happening in East Africa, the biggest challenge is that both government, financial institutions, hardly understand the fisher community. They hardly even make that effort to go to them. Recently, I had a discussion with one of the financial institutions in Kenya, and the response was that that's a very risky sector, and we cannot invest, we cannot work in that sector. And so, how therefore do we bring the communities, how do we bring the fisher folk to raise their voices? Because it is their right to access some of these services. And that's why I'm happy with what SFC is doing in developing products for the fisher communities. In the project she's talking of, we have actually been working for the last 1 year, almost and a half. And in this journey, we have involved the communities. We have sat down with the communities, we have been to their villages, and we are asking, if you are to develop a financial product, how will it look like? If you are to work on coming up with a product that will be able to serve not only the current fisher folk, because we are talking of something that can run years from now, then how will this product look like? And so the journey has been long, but we believe that at the end of this, we are going to have a product. I'm also happy that the product we are talking of is not only going to benefit the fisher folk, but it's also going to make the world, and especially the different governments, understand the people we are talking of. Because right now, governments really don't have enough understanding. And I'll give an example of loans that were disbursed in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. This was a World Bank loan. And the fisher folk were given loans. And the way the government works is that come together as fishermen in this particular LMMA, and we will give you loans. And loans were given in Kenya, loans were given in Uganda, and loans were given in Tanzania. And immediately immediately they got the loans, they actually they migrated to different locations, to different countries. Those in Uganda came to Kenya, and those in Kenya went to Tanzania, and it was like that. And that loan was never repaid. And of course, people always blame the fisher folk. But you ask yourself, what process was followed? Was this product really the best for them? What else did they need to be able to get this support? And I think that's where we need to start from. That's, as change agents in this field, we must understand the communities. We must understand their needs. And we must involve them in getting solutions to those challenges. Unless we do that, then we are still going back to the World Bank money that was given, and the fisher folk disappeared. One of the things we are doing as BV is still also trying to, what we do mostly is to understand the community, respond, and our products are actually designed in response to the communities. And what it also involves is not just working with the local communities. It also calls that we, as the development agencies, how really do we come and share what we have? A number of times we want to work in silo, and that does not respond. Again, we hardly involve the government. And when we talk of sustainability, then how again do we involve the government? Thank you.
Nelly, thank you so much. I think you've painted such a vivid picture, which is really critical to understand that every new sustainable finance innovation, every new instrument, every new structure that we want to build, we need to be able to build it from that co-design point of view. So together finding the right finance solution, together designing the right finance solution, and to learn from some of the mistakes that have been made in the past. So Nelly, thank you for sharing that. Lisa, I'm going to come to you. We are moving into the finance side of the coin, but you'll see that this is one coin, finance and nature and communities together. To take us a little bit through the design process and to give us a concrete example in how we've worked side by side with our partners like Sanlam, like BV, to go from find into design. How do we actually build a finance solution once we've identified or co-identified the right option for us?
Yeah, thanks Candice, and hi everybody. Like in one word, it's really hard, to be honest. It's really hard. Like when I hear Nelly talk, and when I hear Jerry, and I hear the depth of knowledge in the communities and the connections that are there, I also hear a lot of complexity in that. It's nuanced, and you said it, Candice, no BMU is the same. No community, no landscape, seascape is the same. So it's so nuanced, and so there's a complexity and a depth of knowledge there. And then there is likewise a depth and complexity on the supply side of capital, on the financial side. And so, yeah, really great to have Sanlam here sharing from their perspective. But even then, there are many more avenues and complexities within finance. There's a continuum in conservation side. There's a continuum on the capital side, and so navigating that and bringing them together is really, really hard. And I think hard things are possible, but I do think that it needs a systematic lens to bring it together, and I think that's really what we try and do at the coalition in the design space. Yeah, it's a challenge that we rise to. So yeah, I'd love to just share some practical examples of how we're addressing some of those challenges. So much is bringing the right people together. So when we look at community-led conservation, how do we bring the voices of the communities in to speak to the right people on the financial side? And so that takes a knowledge on both sides. At the coalition, we have a Finance for Nature ecosystem, which is a broad range of stakeholders that we bring together. And you can't bring 40 people together, but it's which ones are the right stakeholders to bring together around a niche grouping of experts. And so that's the process we go through after our FIND process, finding that right finance solution. But then who are the right people? Who is the right community voice? Which is the right financial voice to have? And very often it will be more than one. And bringing them together. So that's a real start of the design process that we go through. I'll share two examples from the Blue Finance space. So the one is the Blue Frontier Fund, which I'll let Tebogo share a little bit more about as well. But that's really in partnership with Sanlam Investments, and that was really looking at how do we help and how do we work with financial institutions, asset managers who want to have a blue lens, a blue finance lens. They want to have an impact in the blue finance space, but they have their own restrictions and protocols and fiduciary duty to meet. So how does that work? And how do we bring in to make sure that the impact is real? And so there again, really grateful to have the input of WWF drawing alongside us there, sharing their input in terms of the conservation side, and where does that look, and how do we actually make sure that a financial institution can have real impact. So that journey has been just over a year of working through that grouping. We're really excited to have got to the point that we have, and there's a little bit more in a booklet at the back, just sharing just what some of the parameters of the fund are. But it's an impact fund that is aiming to reach across Pan-African, is the vision, blue finance opportunities. So unlocking finance for conservation in the blue space. Another opportunity and a finance solution that we're working on is a Blue Outcomes Fund, and that's looking at how outcomes funding can be channeled again in the blue economy space. It has a slightly different, it has a different structure to an impact fund, but it's an outcomes fund. So again, and I won't maybe necessarily go into the structure of the fund, and happy to chat afterwards about that because I don't want to take up more time. But the point there is it's a different grouping that is brought together then for an outcomes fund. And we meet once a month as a task team, gathering, again, different lenses, conservation lenses, financial lenses, in this case also structuring lenses around how an outcomes fund needs to be structured. And coming back to my point around the fact that it's hard, there are a lot of challenges that come up. And the being open to changing where you need to, but bringing in new people when you need to, and having that ability to bring in a catalytic funding as well, or a catalytic stakeholder that might just be needed to unlock that relationship, is also just being open to that. So it's dynamic and it's structured at the same time, and having that balance is really what we strive for, and I believe is really what will get finance solutions across the line. There's a humility in that as well, bringing people together that may be experts in their own right, but there's a humility in saying we're doing something new here, and how do we do that together? When you can get that right, the right people with the right attitude and the right shared vision, then I believe finance will get unlocked, and that's what we're really striving to do with those two solutions.
Thanks, Lisa. I think it's really clear the level of complexity that has to come together in order to design a new sustainable finance solution. Multiple voices, multiple expertise, answering really tough questions to create something brand new. And so when I say that the coalition believes in two things, it is that systematic approach that puts the structure in place, and that ability to work shoulder to shoulder, to have that collective action to create these new finance solutions. And with something like the Blue Outcomes Fund, which is a completely different structure to what Tebogo was going to share on the Blue Frontier Fund, that it required an independent task team to create each of those blue finance solutions. But then importantly, we want to be able to see them deliver finance that really connects back to communities. So how does something like the Blue Outcomes Fund, which Lisa's driving the design of, how does it support small and micro enterprises for fisher folk in a very informal sector? How do we start to drive a lot of outcomes in that space and connect finance to that impact? So that brings me to Tebogo, and we're coming right to the other side of the coin on finance, and to hear the perspective of a financial institution as big as Sanlam. Sanlam Investments has an enormous footprint across the African continent, and really holds an incredible space in terms of leading in investments, but also now starting to grapple with what does real impact look like for the blue economy. And so going through the finance model alongside Sanlam, from find through to design, to get a solution like the Blue Frontier Fund, which is an impact fund, to the point that it's ready to make its first transaction. If you could just share a little bit around that financial institution perspective.
Thanks, Candice. I mean, one of the things is it's not easy, like you said, Lisa. And as Sanlam Investment, let me talk about, when we talk about scale, we often think that we need grant funding or concessional funding for scale. But private sector has a big role to play when it comes to scale. Because what we do is, if we go, you need a few institutions, not a lot, like an institution that can put up its hand and say, I'm willing to be that blueprint, so that I can prove that there is feasibility here. When we talk of the risk, I know Nelly spoke of risk. What we're saying is the risk of the unknown. We don't know the space, we don't know what the revenue is, the sector and all that. That's what private sector is saying. So Sanlam goes in there to try show that we can have a blueprint and we can have a blue fund. So So that's what we actually did. So when we designed the Blue Frontier Fund, we are a financial institution. We've always invested on capital market, fixed income, equities, and now having to learn to invest in nature, which is a new space. It's a switch. And if you're now working with portfolio managers or an institution that has a way of doing things, have a way of looking at risk, this space doesn't provide that. And we don't understand it, and we don't engage with communities. It's completely different. Now, for us to put up our hands, obviously we can't go in that alone. We had sustainable finance, which they've been working with communities, they've seen these businesses, they also understand the finance, so together we can try and find a mutual way to invest in this space. So the Blue Frontier Fund we've been talking about was a good way for us to test the waters, direct some of our capital towards it. We set it up as an impact fund, but very quickly we saw that the returns that we will make from the Blue Frontier Fund will be very different to the returns we used to. So that also changes the language that we have. And we have to understand, as a financial sector, we manage money for pension funds, clients, your retirement money, and you have an expectation of what you want at the end of it. And we sign that contract and we say, we'll give you that return. Now, we need to be responsible to make sure that we meet that return. But also we care about nature. So we are caught between we want to do good in a space that doesn't give the same returns, but we have a fiduciary duty to make sure we give you your returns for your pension funds. So instead of stepping back and saying we can't play either way, we come to be innovative, and that's what sustainable finance was. We've designed a structure. It has some grant funding concessional to help us meet the returns, but also give us a bit of freedom to take the risk that is the risk of unknown to build a blueprint. How we see this for us is, if we can go in there, have a structured Blue Frontier Fund, it's successful, other institutions will come. We give a blueprint. A blueprint is saying this is the risk, this is the space, this is the governance structure. We may be successful, we may not be, but once we have it, another fund can come and start fund two. Sanlam can also come in and mobilize more capital. So that's how we see our role. It's that institution that puts up its hands to take the risk.
So we're very grateful that Sanlam did put up their hand to take the risk and create Blueprint. Before I open up to the rest of our colleagues in the Indaba, Teboho, maybe you can just share a little bit more around the Blue Frontier Fund in terms of we went through such a rapid design process. We went through the finance model. We raced through it. It was the fastest we've ever gone through find and design and mobilize. And then to get right to the end where we have an exciting transaction on the table that's going to support the blue economy. It's got impact in jobs, it's got impact in sustainable fishing and biodiversity, but we hit one or two snags. And that's the hard that Lisa was talking about. That's the complexity that we've had in this discussion. And to just share a little bit around what it means to pivot, to be flexible, and where we've had to look at grant finance to come in and to de-risk, because there are also the role players in the donor space, and they have a critical role to play in some of these innovations as well.
Yeah. So when we started the fund, we wanted to design it just as Sanlam to play a role with sustainable finance. We have